This is the first flute etude in C major from Kohler's Opus 33, Book 2. This etude is also featured in Volume 2 of Melodious and Progressive Studies for Flute and is a study in arpeggios and flexibility, including intervals up to an octave. After I play through the etude for you, I'll be guiding you through some slow practice while giving you some of my best tips on how to prepare this etude successfully, whether it's for your next lesson, an audition, or just for personal enjoyment, because it is very beautiful music. So please be sure to stick around for the tutorial after the performance. If you're enjoying this video so far, please let me know by giving it a like and in the comments. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel for more informational and inspirational flute content like this. This etude is marked allegro and risoluto. Risoluto is an Italian word which means with resolve, meaning strong and with determination. As for the allegro part, I would advise you to not go too quickly. I keep my metronome around maybe the high 90s to the low 100s, if that helps. Since this etude is not so easy, if you're learning it, you probably already have a decent amount of experience playing the flute. Hopefully this includes familiarity with your major and minor arpeggios. You're going to want to review some of those arpeggios, including C major, G7, A major, D7, E7, D minor, and A minor. Did I miss any arpeggios in that list? Please let me know down in the comments. In addition to your standard arpeggios, you're also going to want to practice inversions. An inversion is an arpeggio that starts on a different note other than the main one. For example, in C major, the standard arpeggio is the first inversion starting on E, and the second inversion starting on G. I invite you to make an extra copy of your etude and mark where you see these different arpeggios in the music. Being able to recognize a C major arpeggio versus G7 versus D7, including in their different inversions, will help you to process the music a little bit easier and a little bit better. Figuring out the harmony will also help you with interpretation. Let's take a look at measure 3, for example. If you notice, this is mostly C major arpeggios in different inversions. However, can you pick out the notes that are not in C major? Notice that these notes also have accents on them because these are the colorful notes, the dissonant notes that are not in the chord, and you're going to want to bring those out and color those to make them a little more special. Let's start with some slow practice on the first 4 measures. I'm going to set my metronome to 55, and if you don't get it on the first try, that's okay. Just go ahead and rewind and try again. 1, 2, 3. Moving on to measures 5 through 8, you'll notice that the rhythmic format is pretty similar to the first 4 measures. However, it does start in a minor key, D minor, and it goes higher. These are all indications that the composer might want it a little bit more intense. So let's try to add a little bit more intensity into these next 4 measures. 1, 2, 3. So please notice in measure 9 that the majority of the notes are just C major arpeggio, but we also have these colorful neighbor tones, which we call appoggiaturas. And that's going to be the D above the C, the F going into the E, and the A going into the G. So you're going to want to phrase towards those appoggiaturas. Ya-da-dee-da, da-da-dee-da, da-da-dee-da, da-da-dee-da. In the next measure, going back and forth between those high Gs can be a little bit tricky, so here are a few ways that you can practice it. Let's start by holding the lower notes longer and playing them also a little bit louder, so emphasizing and holding longer. Ya-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee. Good. Now let's reverse that. So a little bit less and a little bit shorter on the low notes and a little bit more and longer on the high notes. Ya da 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 dee da dee. If you need to repeat that a few times, please go ahead and pause the video so that you can do so. But for now, let's go ahead and practice those 2 measures with a metronome. And I'm going to leave out the downbeat because I've already played it, and I'm going to start on the E. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looking at measures 11 through 12, these are now centered around A minor with that same arpeggio figure, da-da-dee-da, da-da-dee-da. In the 4th beat of measure 12, I'm going to have to lift my thumb on the C, and when my thumb comes back down on the A, I'm going to reach over for the B flat thumb, and this is just to prepare for the next measure, which has a lot of B flats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looking at measures 13 and 14, these are basically an outline of A major, again with these appoggiatura neighbor tones. For this section, you're going to want your B flat thumb on, and you're also going to want to think about connecting the seconds, meaning the B to the A, but also the larger interval, meaning the A to the F. 1, 2, 3, 4. In measures 15 and 16, it's basically the same idea, except centered around D minor. However, in measure 16, in beat 3, when I go from the high G to the F, I'm going to move my thumb from the B flat to the regular thumb to prepare for the B naturals in the next measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. In measures 17 through 22, this pattern takes quite a bit of flexibility. The pattern remains the same, however, the harmony changes every 2 bars. So let's start with 17 through 18, and I'm going to start by dividing this into a few parts. So first, just the first 2 notes. Pretty easy so far. Then, and then the octave jump, and then it repeats again. So from a flexibility standpoint relating to your facial muscles, I think it's very useful to divide this phrase, which is kind of all over the place, into those few parts. And even if I'm playing it continuously, I'm still going to be thinking about those parts. So let's go ahead and practice that with a metronome. Just measures 17 and 18. 1, 2, 3. Continuing with measures 19 and 20, here's the metronome again. 1, 2, 3. I should mention that in some editions, they'll ask you to breathe after the first two notes of the measure, and this is just something that I'm choosing not to do for an artistic reason. I just prefer to breathe at the bar line. Let's continue with measures 21 and 22, going into the downbeat of measure 23, and this just finishes out the pattern. 1, 2, 3. Now we get to what might be one of the trickier parts of this etude in measures 23 to 26. So let's start by practicing this uneven. We'll start by stretching and accenting the lower notes. Ya, dee da, dee da, dee da. 2, 3, 4. Good. Now let's go ahead and accent and stretch the upper notes, so all of those G's. So it's going to be da, da, dee, da. 2, 3, 4, 1. Good. Now let's try changing up the articulation. So first, let's start by articulating every two notes starting on the first note. So it'll be ta, 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 but the rhythm's going to be even. 2, 3, 4, 1. Now we're going to switch that up, and we're still going to articulate every two notes, but we're going to start on the second note. So it's going to be da ti a ti a ti a ti a. So articulating on the G's. 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, now I think we're ready to practice it as written with the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, like I mentioned before, this is one of the more tricky parts of the etude, so if you need a little bit more time, go ahead and rewind or just pause the video and practice a little bit. Moving on to measures 25 and 26, I just want you to focus on the upper notes to begin with. And then think of those upper notes as kind of your placement anchor that's running through the music, and you're just going to lightly reach down to grab those lower G's. 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, I'm leaving out a lot of rallentando and ritardando in this particular practice because we're practicing with the metronome and we're going slow anyway. However, make sure that you include those details when you play this without a metronome. Let's now practice the next four measures from measure 27 through measure 30. And in the first measure, you're going to have that same concept of anchoring on the upper notes, just reaching down to grab that lower note. So that's going to be in measure 27 as well as in measure 29. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the next section, starting at measure 31, I'm going to phrase something like, Ya da 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 dee dong, dee da 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 dee dong, da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee dee dum. So here are measures 31 through the downbeat of 35. 1, 2, 3, 4. From measure 35 out to the end, we're just going to be going between C major and G7 and C major and G7 back and forth. Notice that in the first two measures, the harmony changes every 2 beats. But then in measure 37, it goes to every beat, so the pace quickens. And then finally, we resolve to C major for the last 2 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that we've completed our slow play along, I hope you've gotten some value out of this practice and have learned a few things along the way. And if so, please let me know by giving the video a like and by subscribing to my channel. At this point, you might feel ready to go back to the beginning of this video and try to play along with the original version. Otherwise, here's a video I picked out for you that you might want to watch. Thanks so much for watching and happy practicing.